The story of Keanu Reeves doesn't begin with the fame, the red carpets, or the sleek suits that we now associate with him. It begins in the shadows, quiet corners of his life where pain and loss carved themselves into his soul. Keanu was born in Beirut, but his father abandoned him when he was just 3 years old. His mother, a costume designer, moved him across continents, from Sydney to New York and finally to Toronto. Constant uprooting became the rhythm of his childhood. In those years, he learned how to adapt, how to survive, how to be strong without asking for help. That resilience would later become one of the trademarks of both the man himself and the character the world would come to know as John Wick. But back then, he was just a lonely kid who loved ice hockey and dreamt of being a goalie, guarding the net as if protecting something sacred. Life, however, never allowed Keanu long stretches of peace. Tragedies seemed to stalk him like a relentless shadow. His younger sister, Kim, was diagnosed with leukemia when she was still very young. Keanu, barely in his 20s, threw himself into her care, spending countless nights in hospitals, learning patience and compassion the hard way. He donated millions silently to cancer research later in his life, but in those early years, all he had was his time, his heart, and his fierce determination not to let her feel alone. That sense of loyalty, of giving everything for someone he loved, became etched into his very being. It was not a performance. It was who he was. And decades later, audiences would see those same qualities mirrored in John Wick's relentless pursuit to honor the love he lost. Yet, Keanu's journey wasn't only defined by loss, it was defined by how he carried it. He lost his best friend, River Phoenix, to a drug overdose in 1993, a devastating blow that shattered him. Then, years later, Keanu and his fiancée, Jennifer Syme, were expecting a child, only for their daughter, Ava, to be stillborn. The grief tore them apart, and not long after, Jennifer herself died in a tragic car accident. Most men would have been crushed beyond repair. But Keanu carried his sorrow with a quiet dignity. He didn't lash out at the world. He didn't numb himself with fame or wealth. He walked among people, sometimes even taking the subway in New York, offering his seat to strangers without revealing his identity. He lived simply, as though he was constantly searching for balance in a life that seemed determined to tilt against him. That quiet strength of absorbing life's pain without becoming bitter became Keanu's defining trait. The world looked at him and saw sadness in his eyes, the kind of sadness you can't fake. But instead of pushing people away, it drew them closer. He was no longer just an actor. He was a man who understood suffering, a man who carried grief the way warriors carry scars. The storm of loss had tested him, and instead of breaking, he stood tall. Just like John Wick, he had walked through fire and emerged colder, stronger, and more focused. The stage was set, though no one knew it yet. When Keanu Reeves stepped into the role of John Wick, he wasn't just playing a character. He was pouring decades of real pain, resilience, and loyalty into every frame. When the script for John Wick first came to Keanu Reeves, it wasn't supposed to be the global phenomenon it became. It was a small, almost experimental project. The role was written for a much older actor, a retired hitman pulled back into a world of violence. But when Keanu read it, he didn't just see an action movie. He saw a story about grief, love, loyalty, and vengeance. He saw something that mirrored his own life, a man broken by loss but unwilling to surrender to it. And when Keanu commits to something, he doesn't half-step. He doesn't show up to say lines and collect a paycheck. He throws himself into it body and soul. With John Wick, that meant he had to train not just like an actor preparing for a role, but like a real assassin preparing for war. The training was brutal. Keanu partnered with world-class experts, Navy SEAL veterans, SWAT instructors, and martial artists who specialized in judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He didn't want to just look like John Wick, he wanted to move like him. That meant long hours in shooting ranges, practicing weapon transitions, reloading drills, and live-fire exercises until his movements were smooth, fluid, and instinctive. Many actors fake their fight sequences, cutting corners with stunt doubles or camera tricks. But Keanu believed that authenticity mattered, so he trained until his body remembered the motions as naturally as breathing. The results were staggering. In time, he achieved a 95% accuracy rate on complex live-fire courses, something most professional soldiers would envy. Footage of him training would later go viral, showing the world that the man behind the character truly had the skill set of the deadly assassin he portrayed. But combat training wasn't only about guns. Keanu spent endless hours mastering hand-to-hand combat, grappling, and takedowns. He learned to chain movements together seamlessly, a strike flowing into a throw transitioning into a chokehold, a disarm leading straight into a counterattack. The choreography was brutal, elegant, and precise, just like John Wick himself. And Keanu didn't complain about the endless repetitions, the bruises, the sore muscles. He embraced them. Every punch he threw, every fall he took, was an act of dedication. When stunt performers sparred with him, they were shocked at how far he pushed himself. He didn't just want to act tough. He wanted to fight in a way that made even professionals pause and think, this guy is the real deal. What made Keanu's preparation even more remarkable was his mindset. He approached training the way a monk approaches meditation, with patience, discipline, and humility. He listened more than he spoke, absorbed instructions quietly, and repeated drills until exhaustion. And when the cameras finally rolled, the work showed. Audiences weren't just watching a choreographed fight scene. They were watching a man who had become his character through sweat, pain, and relentless focus. That's why John Wick's combat felt so different from other action films. It wasn't flashy or exaggerated. It was raw, efficient, and terrifyingly real. And beneath all the martial skill and tactical precision, there was something deeper. Keanu's grief, his loss, his personal battles, all woven into the character. Every gunshot, every strike, every stare carried an unspoken truth. This wasn't just acting. It was catharsis. It was Keanu Reeves channeling decades of pain into a performance that blurred the line between fiction and reality. In those moments, he wasn't only John Wick on screen. He was Keanu Reeves, the man who had suffered, trained, endured, and risen stronger. And it was that authenticity, both physical and emotional, that made audiences believe. Maybe Keanu Reeves wasn't just playing an assassin. Maybe he truly had become one. There are roles an actor plays, and then there are roles an actor lives. For Keanu Reeves, John Wick wasn't just a character. He was a mirror, a reflection of the pain, grief, and resilience Keanu had carried for decades. The heart of the John Wick saga isn't its bullets or bloodshed. It's love, loss, and the lengths to which a man will go when the last fragile thing that anchors him to hope is ripped away. That theme struck a chord with Keanu on a level far deeper than performance. He knew what it meant to wake up each day carrying the weight of emptiness. He knew what it meant to smile at the world while a storm raged silently inside. And so, when the cameras rolled, he didn't have to pretend to understand John Wick's sorrow. He simply had to remember. The tragedy of River Phoenix's death still lingered in him, even decades later. River wasn't just another Hollywood friend. He was a brother in spirit, someone Keanu loved and admired deeply. When River's life was cut short by overdose, Keanu was left grappling with questions that had no answers. Years later, when he fell in love with Jennifer Syme, he felt something rare and pure, a chance at family, at healing. But fate was cruel. Their daughter was stillborn in 1999, a loss so devastating it shattered their bond. Less than 2 years later, Jennifer herself died in a car crash. Within a short span, Keanu had lost not only the family he had longed for, but also the future he had begun to dream of. Few people could endure such blows without collapsing. But Keanu didn't collapse. He endured. Quietly, patiently, stoically. This grief didn't disappear. It lived inside him, and it became part of John Wick. In the film, Wick loses his wife Helen, then the final gift she leaves him, a puppy named Daisy, a symbol of pure love and hope. When that too is taken from him, his grief turns into fury, into unstoppable resolve. For Keanu, the parallels were almost haunting. He knew what it felt like to lose not once but multiple times. He knew the bitterness of watching love slip through his fingers like smoke. And so, when he stood on set with tears in his eyes, mourning over the tiny beagle that symbolized Wick's last connection to love, the audience wasn't watching a performance. They were watching Keanu Reeves tap into the reservoir of his own heartbreak. It's why that scene resonates so deeply. It's why audiences cried with him, because the pain was real. But what makes Keanu remarkable isn't just that he experienced tragedy, it's how he chose to use it. Many people let grief destroy them, hollow them out until nothing remains but bitterness. Keanu turned his pain into power. He transformed his sorrow into art, into authenticity. John Wick's rage and elegance, his focus and fury, came not from an actor pretending to be broken, but from a man who had learned to live with his scars. Every fight scene, every cold stare, every whispered line carried with it the ghost of Keanu's past. In that way, the role became catharsis. It wasn't about revenge. It was about release. About finally letting the world glimpse the storm he carried so quietly for so long. And perhaps that's why John Wick resonated with millions worldwide. Beneath the gunfights and choreography was a story every human understands. Loss, grief, and the desperate search for meaning after tragedy. Keanu, more than anyone, embodied that. His life became the foundation for the character, his wounds the invisible ink in every scene. And in embracing that, he didn't just play John Wick. He became him. Through grief, through loss, through unimaginable pain, Keanu Reeves transformed himself, and in doing so, he turned his real-life suffering into one of cinema's most unforgettable legends. If John Wick is a man of action bound by a code, then Keanu Reeves is his mirror in real life. Away from the cameras, the studios, and the bright lights of Hollywood, stories about Keanu circulate like urban legends. But the difference is, they're all true. He doesn't advertise them. He doesn't call the press. These moments are witnessed by ordinary people who stumble into them and later share their astonishment online. And in those stories, the world sees something extraordinary. A man who could live like a king but instead chooses to walk among the people like a quiet guardian. It is here, in the streets, that Keanu Reeves reveals himself not just as an actor who plays heroes, but as a man who quietly lives like one. There are countless tales, but one that stands out happened on a New York City subway. A shaky cell phone video captured it. Keanu, dressed simply in jeans and a jacket, sat like any other commuter, unbothered and unnoticed by most. Then a woman entered, balancing bags in her hands. Without hesitation, Keanu rose and offered his seat. He didn't know he was being filmed. He didn't do it for applause. It was instinct, respect, humility, decency. Millions would later watch the clip, marveling that one of the biggest stars in the world lived with the manners of an ordinary man. That simple act echoed the essence of John Wick, a man who respects others, who abides by an internal code even when no one is watching. And then there are stories of quiet generosity, of Keanu sitting on sidewalks, sharing meals with homeless strangers, listening more than speaking. On one occasion, he was spotted in West Hollywood, cross-legged on the pavement, eating lunch with a man who had nothing. He didn't rush. He didn't look around nervously to see if anyone was watching. He was present. For Keanu, dignity is not measured by wealth or fame, but by how you treat the forgotten. Fans later compared these moments to Wick's loyalty to the memory of his wife and the love symbolized by his dog, a man who values the smallest gestures of humanity in a brutal, violent world. In real life, Keanu embodied that same fierce compassion, as if he too had written his own unspoken code. Respect the broken, protect the weak, and never place yourself above another soul. Even in moments of conflict, Keanu showed restraint worthy of a disciplined warrior. There are whispered stories of him de-escalating tense situations without violence, calmly separating aggressors, using words and presence rather than fists. Unlike other celebrities who might lash out or call security, Keanu exuded a quiet authority that disarmed people. He never needed to flex his wealth or fame. He carried himself with a kind of stillness, a control that demanded respect. Just as John Wick only unleashes his fury when pushed beyond reason, Keanu holds his fire in real life, choosing peace whenever possible. The contrast is striking. The man who embodies death on screen chooses life, kindness, and dignity when the cameras are gone. All of these stories, subway rides, lunches on the curb, breaking up fights with calm, paint a picture of a man who doesn't just act the part of John Wick. He lives by a code strikingly similar: loyalty, honor, respect, and compassion hidden beneath a steely surface. For audiences, this duality blurs the line between fiction and reality. John Wick may be a myth born from cinema, but Keanu Reeves, through his everyday actions, has convinced the world that legends can walk among us. The streets see the truth, and the truth is that Keanu Reeves, in his humility and honor, is as close to John Wick as the real world will ever know. When the lights fade, when the costumes are packed away, and when the last take is called, most actors return to their lives far removed from the characters they play. But with Keanu Reeves, the separation feels almost impossible. John Wick is not just a role he slipped into, it is an extension of who he is, a projection of the man behind a myth. On screen, Wick is a legend whispered about in underworld corners, feared not because of brute force alone, but because of his unshakable loyalty, his honor, his code. In reality, Keanu Reeves has become something just as rare, a legend whispered about in the stories of ordinary people, admired not because of wealth or power, but because of the humility and integrity with which he carries himself. The man and the myth have fused into one, creating a figure that feels larger than life, yet grounded in the simplest of truths. Keanu never sought to be idolized. He never demanded the world call him extraordinary. In fact, his lifestyle seems almost the opposite of what Hollywood expects. While other stars flaunt their mansions and luxury cars, Keanu rides motorcycles alone on winding roads or takes the subway quietly, like any other commuter. He lives in a modest home, often gives away large portions of his salary to crew members, stunt teams, and hospitals, and avoids the spotlight unless it is for the work itself. It is this refusal to play the celebrity game that makes him so fascinating. In a world obsessed with image, Keanu is uninterested in being polished, untouchable, or elite. He is content to be human. And that choice, more than any film role, has elevated him into a legend people trust, respect, and even love. John Wick may strike with fury when the last fragile thing he loves is taken from him, but outside the cinema, Keanu channels his losses into compassion. He gives without asking for recognition, heals without announcing his scars, and treats each stranger with a dignity that feels almost otherworldly in its rarity. Fans who meet him don't just walk away with selfies, they walk away with stories that echo like myths. He waited with me when my flight was delayed. He bought an ice cream just to sign my ticket. He called me, sir, even though he's the movie star. These small anecdotes add up into something monumental. Proof that Keanu Reeves isn't just kind in theory, he lives it every single day. Just as John Wick became a legend through whispers in the underworld, Keanu has become one through whispers in the real world. And yet, perhaps the most profound connection between Keanu and John Wick isn't in their actions but in their eyes. Both carry a look that words cannot capture fully, a mixture of sorrow and strength, of wounds endured and battles survived. It is a gaze that tells you this is a man who has lost, who has hurt, who has carried the weight of grief, but who has also chosen to stand, to fight, and to protect what matters. That look is why audiences believe in John Wick, why they root for him despite his violent world. It is also why people believe in Keanu Reeves, not as a flawless idol, but as a human being who embodies the resilience we all wish we had. Through that lens, we see not just a character or an actor, but a reflection of ourselves, fragile yet unbreakable, wounded yet alive. And so, when the credits roll and the myth of John Wick is left flickering in the shadows of cinema, what remains is the man behind it all, Keanu Reeves. A man who turned pain into power, who transformed grief into art, and who proved that kindness, humility, and loyalty can still exist in a world starved for them. The legend of John Wick may belong to Hollywood, but the legend of Keanu Reeves belongs to us all. In the end, he is more than an actor, more than a star, more than even the myth he helped create. He is a reminder, a living lesson, that sometimes the greatest warriors are not the ones who fight with bullets, but the ones who live with honor.